Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Everyone, and welcome to Eagle Eye, brought to you by Car Shop. Want certified used cars reconditioned like new? That's Car Shop, formerly Car Sense. Rube, how you doing?
Doing well, Dave. Getting close to the draft, getting excited.
Yeah, I love the draft. And as much as I like to complain about the pre-draft process, I like that too. I love reading mock drafts. I like putting them together. And they're all wrong. We accept that all mock drafts are wrong. But I have so much fun going through scenarios and finding new players. I put out a mock draft and then someone will tell me, hey, check out this player from Illinois State. And I go and I'll watch him a little bit. I love it.
Never in the history of journalism has there ever been anything so popular that's always wrong.
It's true. It's the weather of sports journalism.
It really is. And we are the meteorologists of NBC Sports Philadelphia.
We are. We have a good show for you guys today. Peter King from NBC Sports will join us in just a minute. That'll be really fun. It's been a long time since we talked to Peter. A lot has changed with the Eagles. And since the last podcast, we also had a chance to speak with Eric Wilson and Jordan Howard on conference calls. Eagles' two most recent signings. So we'll kind of go through some of our takeaways with that stuff. You got anything else before we get into Peter King, Rube?
No, let's get to it.
Let's do it. Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast from NBC Sports, Peter King. Peter, it's great to talk to you.
Hi, Dave. Hi, Rube. How are you guys?
We're doing really well. It's been a long time since we talked to you, and it's safe to say a lot has changed with the Eagles. Even in the last couple months, I don't even know where we should start. I guess we should start with the head coach. That was kind of the biggest news right after the season. It was kind of a surprise. If you look back a few years ago, this is a team that wins Super Bowl. He's Super Bowl winning head coach. He's kind of a beloved figure in the city. How did it end up going that bad? And what was kind of the reaction around the league when this all went down?
I think everybody was shocked that it blew up so soon. Because listen, I think the craziest part of all this is that, 35 months after, the biggest win in modern Philadelphia football history, maybe modern Philadelphia sports history, judging by the parade that followed it. I think my biggest reaction is that, there had to be a lot going on during this process that we just didn't know very much about, because you don't have your quarterback for the next 15 years and your coach for the next 10 to 15 years. And all of a sudden, 35 months after the Super Bowl, they're both gone. Well, one's gone and one is on the way out. So I think that part of it is shock. And the other part essentially is that, I don't know how many people basically understand how much had been lost, before it all blew up, since the beginning of this calendar year. And I just think there are some pieces that were lost that were really important pieces. The biggest of which, in my opinion, was Frank Reich, who was lost, within a week or so after the Super Bowl. But I think that was a major loss. Would all this stuff have happened anyway? Possibly / probably. But I do think that it wasn't like everybody woke up in January of 2021 and the thing just imploded. Little pieces had been taken away along the way.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that not only did Doug go from not being the head coach of the Eagles, but he's out of the league. I mean, he's not coaching. And I mean, I don't know. I know Seattle talked to him about some sort of offensive position, but nothing ever came of that. But it's kind of crazy. I don't know if he'll coach again. I think he will at some point. Didn't seem like it didn't seem like teams were interested in him. He didn't have any offers. It was late in the process. Certainly a lot of the jobs have been filled, but it's crazy. I mean, to go from a Super Bowl winning coach to, I mean, it happens to Barry Switzer. It doesn't happen to Doug Peterson, but he's not in the league. The guy won a Super Bowl 3 years ago. He's not in the league.
Listen, Rube, I remember down the stretch of that golden season when everybody from, all the analysts on television, from Chris Collinsworth to Jimmy Johnson to everybody, all the writers are saying, oh my God, this guy has got such a great feel for this team, when to take chances, when not to take chances. Are you kidding me? Philly special, a tight end who'd never thrown a pass in an NFL game, throwing a touchdown pass in a Super Bowl to a guy who had never caught a pass in an NFL game, or whatever Nick Foles' thing was. It was just such a magic period. And it's just hard for me to believe, Rube, that he's not a good football coach, because I think he is. But to your point about, not getting a job this year, I do think that, first of all, so many teams were so far down the road and or had already committed to coaches and teams did not want to take the time to investigate what it must have been, some incredible, borderline scandalous something that led to Doug Peterson not being the coach of the Eagles anymore. And I don't think it was. I think it was just the fact that he and the owner and the general manager had major differences of opinion about how the team should be run and how the game should be called. And so I think that's where it got off the rails.
How'd you like to be Nick Sirianni coming into that situation?
Look, I don't know this, Rube. You guys really would have a better concept of this than I would. I thought Josh McDaniels was going to get this job.
Same.
And if you ask me, just sitting, hey, look, I am sitting in the bleachers and I know the parties involved, but I don't know why exactly what happened. But this has the scent of, Josh McDaniels, at least I think, if he didn't like what was going on October 15th, he would have walked into Howie Roseman's office and said, or Howie walked into his office and Josh would have said, this is BS that we're doing things this way, whatever. Whereas Nick Sirianni, will he have either the gumption or the presence to be able to do that? And I don't know the answer to that. But again, that is sitting in the bleachers watching this, because I don't know precisely why McDaniels did not get this job, but that's my gut feeling that at least part of it is because, hey, look, Sirianni is a very, very good coach. And he's a lot of what I think they were looking for in Doug Peterson, an imaginative young guy who came strongly endorsed from Andy Reid. Here's an imaginative young guy who comes strongly endorsed from Frank Reich. And Reich doesn't quite have the gravitas in the office of Jeffrey Lurie, but he's got some gravitas.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up, because that's kind of become a big topic, especially this week, is, kind of the culture that the Eagles have right now. And we saw the Athletic report from earlier this week that kind of detailed some of the front office and how it went with Doug. And then they kind of bring in a coach. You're right. There's a lot of similarities between Doug in 16 and Nick Sirianni now. I'm kind of curious how the rest of the league views the Eagles' leadership, because Howie's had such an unusual career, and Jeffrey, we've heard recently, like, people are worried about him meddling. That's a word that gets thrown around with owners, but I think it's probably fair to say he's always had somewhat of significant role. What's the view on them from around the league?
The view on them from around the league is that everybody views, I think, the Eagles organization with a bit of a jaundiced eye. That it did work. They put everything together and they won a Super Bowl, but it's going to be hard with so many cooks in the kitchen. Like I was talking after all this happened, I was talking to one general manager who's been in the league for a long time. And he just said, listen, you compare Philadelphia to even a place like Dallas where Jerry's involved in everything. But I don't think, even though Jerry does want to know from the head coach, why did you make this call? I'm not sure that Jerry sits down and says weekly to the head coach, you should have done this, this, and this. And that's currently, the impression that the rest of the league has of what, the structure with the Eagles. Now, is that entirely true? Is that exactly how it goes? I don't know. But I do think that there is the feeling that, the front office is very involved in the decisions that a coach has to make. And so, those are the kind of things that over the long term, over the short term, I think that you could probably say creative tension might have helped fuel this, because Doug Peterson always knew that he was going to have to answer to why he did something. I find it so interesting, though, that, Doug Peterson was just on fire in 2017. And it's almost like he cooled off. He was a 3-point shooter who was Steph Curry in 2017. And then since then, he was, John Doe. His decisions weren't always coming up sevens anymore. And so, again, we don't know exactly what happened during the course of, say, the last year and in the postseason. But, from what we're hearing now, it sure seems like it was the right decision, to move on. And this is a hugely, hugely important year. And when I say it's an important year, I mean, it is an important calendar year, like 13 months, because I think that one of the things that Howie Roseman has done is he has, for better or for worse, set up the 2022 draft as sort of the potential cure-all for this franchise. Because assuming that Carson Wentz doesn't get hurt in Indianapolis, they're probably going to have 3 ones. Will any of the ones be very high? Maybe not, but 3 ones are 3 ones. So it'll be an interesting thing to see over the next 13 months how this team is rebuilt.
Well, let's talk about the quarterback situation a little bit. Your thoughts on Jalen Hurts. I don't know how much you got to see him. He didn't play a lot, played at the end of the year, did some good things, some bad things. And what you expect from Carson. And you wrote about this in Monday Morning Quarterback this week you listed like 20 quarterback changes or situation changes around the league. And, 10 years ago, I remember something Andy Reid told me once. He said, a quarterback needs 5 years in a system before he can really max out. And, these days, nobody's getting that 5 years. And it's not just Carson. The guy picked ahead of him. Jared Goff, all these guys are, there's movement everywhere. There's going to be 12 quarterbacks starting opening day next year who started for the same team this past year. The big picture is, why do you think there's so much of that? And just specifically on the Eagles situation, how you think Carson will do in Indy, and how you think Jalen will do if he's still the quarterback in September.
It's just so weird. By the way, football morning in America, Rube. I haven't written Monday morning quarterback in 3 years.
It'll always be that to me. I know I know, but it'll always be.
Well, yeah, it'll always be that. And a lot of people say that to me, and I understand, but Albert Breer is writing it now. So I feel like every time somebody says that to me, they're reading Albert Breer and thinking that I wrote it, but anyway, let's take the world view first. Okay. I got a note in my column coming up next Monday in Football Morning in America. I get a note in my column next Monday that, that even when I was doing it, it really kind of stunned me. I went back and looked at the drafts from 1980 to 2000, and then the drafts from 2001 to 2020. So, basically the last 2 decades of the last century and the first 2 decades of this century, the average draft slot of the first quarterback taken from 80 to 2000, the average pick in the draft was 13.9. So basically, the average quarterback, the first quarterback picked, was the 14th overall pick, was a mid-first round pick. The average draft slot of the first quarterback picked in the 20 drafts of this century is 2.1. It has been a revolution. And if the 2013 draft didn't happen the way it did, when E.J. Manuel was the top pick and he was the 16th overall pick, what you're talking about is that it'd be the average draft position would be like 1.5. It would be 1 almost every year. But so that gives you some idea of why there is such impatience. The other reason why I think there's impatience is there's a tremendous advantage in the first 4 or 5 years for a first round quarterback, because that first round quarterback is going to have a very manageable salary, and he's not going to eat up 35 or 40 million bucks on your cap every year. If you're the Atlanta Falcons right now, you not only picking number 4, you not only have to decide whether Matt Ryan has 5 good years left, which I think he probably does. You have to decide if you want to, on the cap, pay him over that 5-year period, probably an average of $38 million on the cap, versus drafting Justin Fields, let's just say, or Trey Lance at number 4, and that average cap number over the next 4 or 5 years would be about $7 million, maybe $8 million. So you now understand very easily that okay, there's motivation to be impatient with veteran quarterbacks. And if you're nearing the end of the road with a young quarterback, throw him away, throw Sam Darnold away. Let's go get Zach Wilson. The Jets, Zach Wilson will be the 6th quarterback picked in the top 2 rounds of the last 16 drafts. The 6th one picked. And none of those quarterbacks have lasted longer than 5 years with that team.
Christian Hackenberg lasted about 5 days.
Christian Hackenberg never played, and they used the 51st pick in the draft on him. And, there not only is misjudgment on quarterbacks, but there is incredible impatience on quarterbacks. Now, I probably blame Carson Wentz more for the Carson Wentz thing than I blame the Eagles. I do blame Carson Wentz more. And again, I wrote this at the time, and I realize that it is not the same thing. But Carson Wentz saw that his team had taken a quarterback with whatever it was, the 53rd pick in the draft. And I think I'm probably the only person in the media who loved the pick, because in my opinion, if you can't be sure that Carson Wentz is going to play the full year, you don't want to have to rely on Nate Sudfeld to play 6 or 8 games for you to get you into the playoffs. You want a good backup quarterback who can play and win games for you. You know, everybody says, wow, this Kyle Shanahan, he's a great quarterback coach. Well, I think he's a very good quarterback coach. No question about it. But he's been the coach of the San Francisco 49ers for 4 years. In one of those years with Jimmy Garoppolo, has he had a good to very good starting NFL quarterback? They won 13 games that year. His other 4 years with a bunch of schmoes, they've won 6, 6, and 4 games. So, I mean, you know, and so my point about Carson Wentz is that he obviously responded very negatively to Jalen Hurts being drafted. Like, oh my God, they're bringing in somebody to take my place or to put pressure on me or to play mind games, whatever it is he's thinking. Okay, he's probably never going to say it, but we know that he's got to be ticked off about this. You know, and I look at Tom Brady in 2014, where, you know, all he's done at that point is win 4 Super Bowls for New England. And now in the draft that year, here comes at the end of the second round, Jimmy Garoppolo, the guy is being drafted to replace Brady at whatever age he was at that time, 37, I forget, 36. And Tom Brady, here's how he responded. The next 4 years, he wins the MVP once and he wins 2 Super Bowls. And so to me, that's how a competitor responds. A competitor responds and says, you are never, ever taking my job, you know? And, you know, Carson Wentz just said, okay, you want this guy? Let me get out of here. He didn't, you know, I'll bring up Brady again. When Tom Brady was a sophomore at Michigan, he was like 5th or 6th on the depth chart still. And he goes in and tells Lloyd Carr he's going to transfer. And Lloyd Carr says, okay, we'll let you out if you want to go, but you're going to have the same problem wherever you go. You're going to be in a group of quarterbacks and you're going to have to beat them out. We love you. We think you're good. I think you're going to be the quarterback of this team one day. I don't know when, but I think you're going to be the quarterback. Stay here, fight it out. You'll win the job. And Brady thought about it and he thought, okay, I think as angry as I am about where I am on the depth chart, I think he's right. I will win this job. Where was that in Carson Wentz? It bugs me a little bit. I like Carson Wentz. I don't think he responded to this very well.
Do you think some of that is on the team too, though? I mean, if you have this guy who, you know, went through what he went through in 17, watching his backup lead the team and all that, or do you think that they were justified taking Jalen Hurts regardless of whatever had happened with Carson before that?
What happened to Carson Wentz is the exact same thing that happened to Jimmy Garoppolo, only with Wentz, with Garoppolo, meaning that, you know, the 49ers, I think, even though they really liked Carson Wentz, or they really liked Jimmy Garoppolo, they weren't madly in love with Jimmy Garoppolo. But their point about what they did at the quarterback position was that we need to be absolutely sure that we're going to have a healthy guy, a healthy starting quarterback, so that we don't have to rely on CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins. And, you know, you could say the same thing in Philadelphia. You know, Nick Foles isn't going to be there. We cannot rely on Nate Sudfeld to take us to the playoffs. We need a better backup quarterback for a guy who has had 2 of his professional seasons end with injuries that were season-ending injuries. And I'm honestly mind-boggled at the reaction of Carson Wentz. I mean, this is the big boy league. You've got to understand that the best part of ability is availability. And if you're not there, you might not be there. That team has to buy insurance for if you're not there. I believe and one of the reasons why I thought Jalen Hurts was a good pick, I believe that the Jalen Hurts is the backup quarterback is one of the top 10 most important people on your team, because you had better be sure that if your quarterback gets hurt, your starter gets hurt, that your season isn't over. And, you saw what happened with the 49ers. Their season was over when Garoppolo went down. And they had other injuries as well. And that's why I think that I do understand that there has to be other factors in why this didn't work. And so it's not this alone, but I think it's a very big part of it.
You talked about something that to me is the most interesting thing in the draft, which is the Falcons and what they're going to do at 4, where they're going to get out of that pick. Matt Ryan still throws 40 touchdowns, 4,500 yards, completes 70% of his passes. If I'm the Falcons, I'm not in a hurry to get a quarterback. Because like you said, the cap number, if you bring in a young guy, it's going to be low, but you're still committed to him for 2 years anyway, either with cap or dead money. But that pick, what they do at 4 really is going to determine the whole course of the draft.
You're right. The draft this year is totally dependent, as we sit here right now, a couple of weeks away. It's totally dependent on the Atlanta Falcons. The reason is the Atlanta Falcons easily could take one of the 2 quarterbacks who will be available, easily could take the best tight end that anybody's ever scouted, more Gronk than Gronk, in Kyle Pitts. And the other thing is, I still think, my buddy Peter Schrager had in his mock draft the other day that the Patriots were going to trade from 15 to 4, which basically would kill their next 2 drafts if they did that. And I'm not saying they won't do it. It's just not a Patriot thing to do. But Patriots have done a lot of non-Patriot things in this offseason so far. So who knows? But there's no question in my mind the Falcons could trade this pick to a team that wants a quarterback. And look, I think the fascination of this draft, honestly, you look between 4 and 9, and there are 3 teams, okay, Atlanta, Carolina, and Denver, who could, number 1, take a quarterback, or number 2, they could trade for a ransom to either New England at 15, Washington at 19, or Chicago at 20, who would want to come up and get it. And again, look, if I were the Falcons at 4, any of those 3 teams call me, here's what it starts with. Moving back to your pick in the first round and your first round picks in 2022 and 23. And that's not all. We want probably one other sweetener, because look, if you have to take into account what the 49ers did to go up 9 spots to get a quarterback. And to go up 9 spots to get a quarterback, they traded 2 future ones and a 3. And so to go up from, say, 19 to 4, it's going to be so prohibitive. Either Chicago or Washington or New England has to love one of these guys to basically, to basically eliminate any being a major factor in any of the next 2 drafts in 22 or 23.
The 49ers have to know who they're taking, right? You wouldn't trade all that just to get up there and not.
I think, Dave, when they made this pick, or when they made this trade, I disagree that they knew for sure who they were going to take. Like, if you ask me, if you gave me sodium pentothal and say, what is your rock solid opinion about this based on what you know, I would say that Kyle Shanahan wanted Mac Jones, and that there were others in the building, and I don't know who might want other quarterbacks. But they made the trade exactly a month before the first round, and their whole feeling was, if we are going to make this trade, are we sure that we are comfortable with one of these three quarterbacks basically taking us out of the first round until 2024? Are we comfortable with that? And there was universal agreement. This is a tough trade to make, really tough, because not if you do pick Mac Jones, think about how difficult it is. Think about the pressure on Mac Jones walking into San Francisco. First of all, the 49ers took him way ahead of what many/most teams would do. And, and even though he may not play much, if at all, in his first year, whenever he does play, there's just going to be a tremendous amount of pressure for the 49ers to be right.
I just had a memory. This came back to me as you were talking about the Falcons pick. It's April of 1988. And the Eagles draft room was in a windowless basement at the Vet. I believe it was actually, it was like an electrical closet, I think. I'd never met you. And you came in with a fax machine, a printer, a Kuiper's guide, an Arlad's guide, a Buchsbaum guide, 3 or 4 other draft guides, a ream of blank paper. And you set it all up there in the front row of the press room. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't even remember it. Yeah,
that was, and this is pre-internet, and you had your printer and your fax machine all set up. You had your whole workstation, and but because the Eagles drafted Keith Jackson that year at number 13, who had caught about 30 passes in his entire college career at Oklahoma, and I thought they were crazy. It's the first time I ever spoke with you, and you liked the pick. And you thought he ended up catching like 90 balls his rookie year, but I don't know, that just came back to me for some reason. But
the draft has changed a little bit, Reuben.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was 12 rounds all in one day back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if the first round, there was no ESPN. I don't know. I guess the first round wasn't. We would find out the picks on the phone. They would call the teams up. But anyway, when you look at the Eagles quarterback situation, you talked about Hurts a little bit. They've been linked to everybody from Russell Wilson to Deshaun Watson, if his issues are ever resolved, or who knows with who knows? How do you see it playing out long term? Everybody, and they, once they went from 6 to 12, it was clear they weren't going to draft one this year, at least not in the first round. But how do you see that all playing out? Do you think Jalen Hurts has a chance to be the guy long term? Do you think he's a placeholder? There's a theory that they're stockpiling all these picks, like you alluded to earlier, probably have 3 ones most likely in 2022 to make a big push like they did in 16 to get way up and get the top guy. How do you see it all playing out?
I think that, for those who think that Jalen Hurts can't win this job, I think the Eagles desperately want him to win this job, because then they will be able to spend draft choices to build a great team in 2022, instead of having to package a bunch of picks to be able to move up, to get the next quarterback. So they don't want to do that. They want Jalen Hurts to play great. They want him to play like he played against Kyler Murray last season. They want him to have 16 of those games. And so, yeah, he's definitely got a chance. He absolutely has a chance. For those who think he doesn't have a chance, just look at the 2016 Dallas Cowboys season, when this all was lost, when Romo got hurt, and then Dak Prescott comes in and plays so well that Romo can't get his job back. It's like Tom Brady doesn't let Drew Bledsoe get his job back. And so he has a chance, but obviously he's got to play great with some thin talent on that offense particularly what is his protection going to be like? Are they finally going to be able to get enough out of receivers who just never seem to be, no matter how much draft capital they spend on them, just never seem to be enough at that position for the Eagles. And, the Justin Jefferson non-pick could haunt the Eagles for years. But I think he definitely has a chance. And if he were to win this job and play really well this year, if I'm, Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, Jeff Lurie, what's going through my mind is, man, imagine when he gets some real thorough talent, at positions that right now we're sort of scotch taping together.
That's an interesting point about them kind of rooting for it, because you're right. You kind of go back to the Falcons. If they can get this guy, after this year, he'll still have 2 more years under contract as the 53rd pick. You're talking about peanuts for your starting quarterback. And then they'd have potentially 3 first-round picks to give him talent. It makes sense. But do you think he's going to have to hit a certain level of play for them if there is some kind of division in the building about whether or not they really like him? Is he going to have to play above a certain level to be the guy?
I think you're going to know. I mean, it's like everybody at this time of year always wants to ask this question, about coaches who enter the season, and you're not really sure about them. Okay. They always want to say, well, how many games do you have to win for Coach X to keep his job? And I mean, if I am, there's no way you can answer that question intelligently. You can't say, okay, he's got to win 10 games, because if you start 7-0 and then the rest of the way you go 3-7, I mean, so you finish 10-7, you won 10 games, and you don't make the playoffs, how do you think everybody's going to feel about that? They're not going to feel very good. And I think the biggest thing that you have to ask yourself, I mean, in my opinion, no one could have predicted that, Dak Prescott would have gone, I think he went 13-3 in his rookie year. I mean, he threw 4 interceptions all year. He started all 16 games. It's one of those things that at the beginning of the year, nobody in Dallas is even thinking he's the guy. But by the end of the year, you say, my gosh, we don't even need Romo anymore. This is our guy. And so, I mean, I don't think that Jalen Hurts is going 13-3, and I don't think he's going to play a full season and complete whatever 67% or whatever Prescott did, throw 4 interceptions. It was an incredible year. So, but I do think it's going to be one of those things you're going to know by the end of the year whether he's done enough. That's it. That's how I'd look at it.
What do you think of that 17-game schedule you just referenced?
I'm impressed that it was your internal monologue. You just went to 17. It's going to take me at least 3 years to catch up.
Yeah. The reason I'm not a big fan of it is that the NFL talks about health and safety all the time. And I do not understand how you can talk about health and safety all the time and then say, let's make all the starters play 6% more snaps in the course of a year, when their bodies have gotten used to playing 16 games. Now they're going to be playing 17. And so theoretically, a guy can win the Super Bowl this year playing more games than any NFL player has played in a season. And look, I don't like it, but I also say that, the players voted for this. Their union negotiated this. And I understand why the union did negotiate for this, because D. Smith does not have a union that's willing to go on strike. They just aren't. So, okay, make the best deal you can and we'll work all this out. And then, you will then, every statistic you hear and see this year, well, concussions are down X%. They're this, but concussions are down X% when guys are playing X snaps during the course of the year. Now a starting player is playing X snaps plus 65, plus another full game. So I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand that it's been coming, and probably before I die, there will be 18 games. And it's just sad that some of the richest entrepreneurs in sports history, that no amount of money is ever enough for them.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
True.
I have a fun question for you here. Reuben and I are big Jeopardy fans, so we've been watching Aaron Rodgers on there. We've been pretty impressed. And about a week and a half ago, Reuben put out a story of Eagles he's covered who he thought would be good Jeopardy hosts. Kind of wondering, the players you've interacted with throughout the years, who you think would be able to handle that role well.
Peyton Manning would be fantastic. He's very quick on his feet. Michael Strahan would be absolutely fantastic. He is really, really quick on his feet. As far as current players, I think, for instance, like an Alex Mack, the veteran center. He's really smart. He is Aaron Rodgers smart. They both went to Cal. Funny, but he's Aaron Rodgers smart. And I think he's clever, and I also think he's quick. I think he could do it. And the one other guy who I'm not sure who would ever really want any kind of any world like this. Chris Long could do it. He's obviously really bright, and I think he would be good and also kind of sardonic as a host of Jeopardy. But I don't know off the top of my head. And I think, hey, listen, I think Rodgers is doing a terrific job. And it's funny, Aaron Rodgers is one of these guys. He's not exactly out there looking to be interviewed, but how many interviews has he done in the last 2 weeks with people who I never heard of before, other than Pat McAfee, who he does regularly? But he's done a bunch of interviews, right, with people, and the one thing he says to everybody, he shouts it from the rooftops: I want this job. And he's figured out the math, how many days he'd have to work, when it could happen, all that. And I talked to the executive producer of the show, the guy who's been there forever, Mike Richards, who, it's not going to be Mike's decision necessarily. It's going to be Sony. Sony Pictures actually is the owner of the show. And I'm told that they will probably make a decision based solely on, demographics, numbers, ratings, things like that. I would think, that Ken Jennings, the champion, would be in the pole position. But then, don't you think also that Aaron Rodgers would bring a whole new, potentially could bring a whole new audience to the show? So I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think he's done a good job.
I thought Mike Richards was fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
I
thought he was too.
I'm looking forward to seeing LeVar Burton.
And there's going to be more too, because they are doing these substitute shows until like late August. So I don't know who else is involved, but they got a few more shows to tape. I guess LeVar Burton, he must have already taped his shows. But the good thing about Jeopardy is that, Aaron Rodgers could do this, because you tape a week's worth of shows in one day. There are 46 weeks of shows in a season. Season's long, but you could theoretically, let's say Aaron Rodgers could work 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and he could do that. And essentially in less than 12 weeks, he could do a season of it. And in his off season, like February, March, April, he could be done with that show by the end of April. And so, look, I don't know. I'm throwing that out there, but it's kind of interesting.
What sports writer do you think could host it? No, never mind.
I think Rick Riley would do a good job. The only problem is, I think he'd piss people off, because he would kind of, he would really call a jerk at times. I actually think there's a lot of sports writers who could do it. I couldn't do it, but I do think there's a lot of quick and witty people who could do it. Who could do it? Collinsworth could do it. Collinsworth, I think, would be very good at it, but anyway, yeah, clues of, who will never host Jeopardy, I'll take, people who will never host Jeopardy, I'll take people who will never host Jeopardy for 2000. Put a lot of people in there.
All right, Peter. Well, we appreciate your time. The next time we talk to you, who knows what'll be happening with the Eagles based on the way things have gone in the last few
you know
months.
What? I'm disappointed we didn't at least talk about how much longer can the Phillies wait on Andrew McCutchen to be competent, and on several other Phillies items. But we'll do that another time.
Yeah, we got fooled by that fast start, and now we're back in the same boat. All right, Peter, we appreciate your time.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Beer, wings, sports, PJ Wellahans is the place to get all three. Local sports fans gather together to catch all the action at your neighborhood PJs. Visit pjspub.com to find your closest location.
Thank you again to Peter King. I always enjoy talking to him. And I love your story about him from that 88 draft. He's been doing this at a high level for a long time.
Yeah, he just kept bringing more and more stuff in. And he had like the whole front row, just copy, Xerox machine, a fax machine, a printer, all his draft guides. I mean, back then we all had like the Kuiper's guide, the Arlad's guide, the Bookspawn Pro Football Weekly guide. He had like 20 of them. He had reams of blank paper for the printer and the fax machine. I've never seen anything like it, but he's changed with the changing times. And I think about Peter King. He was like the first blogger. Right when the internet started, he was the first guy to really understand, how to write something readable and that would appeal to, not just hardcore football fans, but all football. I mean, he really kind of pioneered, I think, that whole concept. And it's great to have him working. It's great to work for the same company as Peter.
We were about to say it's great to have him working for us.
I almost said that,
like Eagle Eye signing his checks.
Yeah, I thought that might not be an accurate depiction of the situation, but he's the best. I've known Peter for almost 35 years, and
it's amazing. Like a generation of football fans grew up reading what he had to write every Monday morning.
Yeah, and whatever you call it, his Monday morning piece is it's so readable. It can be like 5,000 words. It's so readable, so comprehensive. It's fun. He darts around from topic to topic. It's so well researched. He covers a lot of ground, and he just has such great insight, and he's funny. He's the best. He's the best at what he does. It's like the Dead. He's not the best at what he does. He's the only one that does what he does.
I get that. And for our NBC overlords, that's Football Morning in America by Peter King.
It'll always be.
Check that out every Monday.
As soon as I said that, I knew that's not the name anymore, but I'm going to go with it. Maybe it'll let me.
It's like the 16-game schedule. It's going to take me a lot longer than it took him to get used to that.
I still call the Titans the Oilers, so
Eric Wilson, we had a chance to talk to him for the first time the other day. Fun guy to talk to, very confident. I like that about him. young guy. I think he's still just 25. He hasn't even turned 26 yet. Comes here in a 1-year deal, not a very expensive deal. It kind of feels like a prove it deal because he's really had 1 year as a starter,
Right.
and it was a good year, but there were some deficiencies. He had 20 missed tackles charged to him, and he was kind of asked about that right out of the gate, and I loved his answer.
Yeah, he said, "I'm a great tackler." He said, I can
I'm
stop
great against the
run.
run. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good against the run, and we'll see. I mean, but his personality reminded me a little of Slay. He had that little smirk. He
Not
knew
as wacky.
Nobody's as wacky, but it kind of reminded me of him. Very confident kid. But you're right. I mean, he's still, he's an undrafted guy. He didn't play at all on defense his rookie year. Started a few games the next couple of years and built up to last year and played well. But I think they're lucky to get him at the price they got him. You're not going to get an all-pro for that contract. But you get a guy who's a playmaker, and you're going to get a guy who needs to get better tackling. But guys can get better. It was his first year, and we'll see how that goes. But it was good to talk to him. I think it's going to be fun to have him around. We'll see how it goes. I mean, certainly there's been a lot of players. We get done with the first Zoom call, we're like, wow, this guy's great. And then he's cut 8 weeks later. But we'll see how it goes. I think it's a good signing.
Yeah, and I'm more encouraged by this one because of the familiarity with Gannon and Nick Rollis. It really, to me, feels like Nigel in 2016, where you just and look, they brought in a few guys from that Bills team in 04 or from 14 that didn't really work out, but having Wilson and having Anthony Harris, you have a linebacker and a safety. Those are two of the most important positions because they're in the middle of the field, they're directing traffic, and to have that when you're implementing this new scheme, it makes a ton of sense. And Wilson, Wilson's on a 1-year deal, but he's young enough that if he plays well and he fits what they want to do, they can re-sign him. He can be here for a long time. It's not like, whereas Harris is a little older. I don't know if he's necessarily a long-term fix. He could be, right, but I think there's a better shot of Wilson being that.
Bradham had more experience when he came here. He had been a starter, I think, 3 years. And he ended up getting a pretty big contract. People talk about they don't spend assets on linebackers. He gave him a lot of money, and his level of play declined once he got that contract. But his first couple of years, he was really good here. So I think, I think he was kind of a little different kind of player, but if they can get the 2017 Nigel Bradham, then they got somebody.
Yeah, I agree. And I really liked what Wilson said about his position coach, Nick Rollis, who is 27 years old. He's believed to be the youngest position coach in the league. And I asked him, like, what does that position coach, being that young, have to do to prove himself to a group of men? And his answer was great. He was like, he has to be himself. And I think that's true. NFL players, all they care about is that their coach can make them better. And if they see evidence of that, they're not going to care how old he is. So as long as this guy knows what he's doing, it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't think it will be. I think, like you said, if guys have had, coaches who are their age and younger, maybe not this extreme, but if they respect him and players can see through assistant coaches really quickly, like one meeting, this guy's a fraud, and we've seen it here. And it's a bad situation, and guys don't get better, and they don't respect their coach, the whole room. It's just, and then some of the veteran players kind of become the de facto coach. It's a bad situation. So you have to be careful with that's why hiring a staff is so important. You really need guys that are going to be respected, and that the veterans are going to look up to, and the young guys are going to learn from. And, we'll see how that goes, but the early signs are pretty good. Unusual hire, but so far, it's so far so good.
That's one of my favorite misconceptions. And we've talked about it before, but that like every coach in the NFL is just automatically a good coach because they made it to that level. Whereas there are some coaches who just aren't cut out for the NFL, who are in the NFL because they know someone or they and players see right through it.
Yeah. And, you can tell at training camp, which is kind of the first time we really get to see these guys in action. You can tell. I mean, fans can tell. You watch these guys, and there's certain guys that are more about putting on a show and trying to, be a hard ass or trying to be this, trying to be that. Just be yourself is the best advice you can give a guy, because these guys will see right through it if you're not.
Yeah. Jordan Howard, we had a chance to talk to him. I haven't talked to him in
a couple of years.
Yeah, it's been a while. And he's had, he was off to this incredible start in his career. He had all this wear and tear. Comes to the Eagles, and it looks like they found something. He gets hurt. And ever since then, after 8 games in the 2019 season, his career's like been non-existent. He went to Miami, got a nice contract, got cut in 5 games in?
5 games in.
Now he's back here, and I appreciate how honest he was with reporters the other day.
Yeah.
But it's not shocking either, but it's like no other team wanted this guy. He made that pretty clear.
Yeah, he said he thought he might have to retire. He's 26. He's 26. He's a former Pro Bowler, a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher. He had the 3rd most rushing yards in the NFL his first 3 years, and he was off to, like you said, a really good start in 19. He was on pace for about 950 yards. He had 6 touchdowns in those first 8 games. There were times where, when he and Miles were both productive, like that Green Bay game. They both had big games. You could kind of see what was possible. And then he got hurt a shoulder, and never saw him again. I think he played 1 snap the last day of the season against the Giants, and never figured out why that was. But then he ends up on the practice squad last year. How humbling is that? Then he had a few carries. I think he had 7 carries. He looked okay. He looked better than he did in Miami, but 7 carries, who knows? This is running backs these days. This is how the NFL is. And you see it every year. These hotshot guys come in, 1,200 yards, 1,300 yards. 2 years later, they're on the street, they're traded, they're cut. That's why running backs rarely get drafted in the first round anymore. Nobody wants to spend assets on a guy that's going to give you maybe 2 or 3 great years and then just, nothing. And it was funny because Jordan talked about it. Everybody just wants an undrafted guy or a late round guy because they're disposable now. And he was a 5th round pick himself. But the Patriots have been winning Super Bowls with doing that, bringing in a Deion Lewis or whoever the guy is that year, guys you never heard of, they gain 800 yards and he cuts them. And that's life as a running back right now. It was really interesting to talk to him. I was not expecting him to be so honest and open about his career path, which is not that unusual for running backs these days, to go from Pro Bowl 1,000-yard season to the practice squad, getting cut and signing a make good deal. There's a chance he could make the team. I think he's still a long shot. I would say a lot has to do with what they do in the draft. But really, Miles and Boston are the only sure things on the roster. And if he can have a good camp, having a veteran back, especially because we think Nick Sirianni is going to run the ball more than Doug. I mean, we know he is.
And Miles hasn't really been able to stay healthy either.
Miles has not stayed healthy. And, it sounds funny, but Jordan Howard, I mean, like he said, he's gone 1.5 years. He's had 35 carries since the middle of the 2019 season. He's 35 carries removed from, but so he's rested. He says he's healthy. The shoulder finally, is healed. I don't know. I would still say he's a long shot, but he could make the team. You never know.
Yeah, and it's hard not to root for him after, But
right.
I'm very skeptical, but we'll see. If he could be what he was a couple years ago, then there's absolutely a spot for him. I just don't know if he can be that.
Yeah, there's no way to know. There's no way to know. I mean, could he have lost it that many? Running backs lose it quickly. And he did, like you said, he had a ton of carries those first few years, especially the first 2 years in Chicago. And they just, they didn't hesitate to get rid of him coming off a 950-yard season. So we'll see. I have a hunch, maybe he can help this team. I don't think he'll ever be the player he was, but the things that, I mean, you want your backup running backs to play special teams, which he doesn't do. He's not a receiver, so he's not the most versatile guy. So I'm not sure what kind of role he could have, but certainly cheap and he's experienced. I think he's a good leader. I think Miles really looks up to him, and Miles has spoken really highly of him, and they get along. There's no egos involved, so he's got a chance. I still think it's unlikely, but you never know.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to talk about today, OTAs, and we don't know if we're going to see them. What's going to happen there? The NFL sent out this revised memo to the teams, basically outlining what they want the spring to look like. And most of it still voluntary the way it's always been, with the one mandatory mini camp. But we've already seen, I think, 4 teams, as of the time we're recording this, have sent out statements through the NFLPA saying we're not showing up for the voluntary part. We'll see what the Eagles end up deciding. I'm in the camp where, look, I understand the concerns. There are legitimate health concerns, and I get that. But there is value in those spring workouts. There just is.
There's no question about it. And I think the whole level of play increases when you have that. It's basically classroom work on the field, and it is valuable, especially for the younger players. I hope they can find some kind of common ground here and get some of that stuff in and agree to do it. I understand their concerns as well. So it's not an easy situation. You would have thought it'd be resolved by now because it's supposed to start in a few days. But we'll see what happens. I've always enjoyed going down to OTAs and mini camps, and for most of the young players, it's the first time you get to see them, and hopefully they can figure something out here.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing with really any player union, is that for the most part, it's run by the veteran players, and the veteran players don't get as much out of these spring practices as the rookies and the younger players do. That's just kind of the way it goes. So I think it does. I don't know if it hurts the younger players, like a rookie coming in, because they don't know anything else, but it helps them if they're there. And especially when you have new coaching staff. When you have a new head coach who's basically the offensive coordinator who's going to install his scheme, and you have a new defensive coordinator, anytime that you get in person on the field working through these, they're basically, in the beginning, it's all like strength and conditioning work. I'm not as worried about that. I feel like these guys take care of themselves, and you can still do the virtual meetings. I'm talking about OTAs. I'm talking about getting in shorts and a helmet, basically, and it's not real football. I know it's not real football. Sometimes we get carried away with, I do observations from it because it's fun, but it's not real football, and I get it, but there's real value in it.
It is. And hopefully they work something out, because I'd love to go down and watch. Really selfish reason.
I just want to watch. I just want to watch some football, even if it is in shorts. You got anything else?
Nope. That was always love having Peter on. We'll have to do that again soon.
Yeah, we appreciate his time. I have a quick story.
Okay.
And I need some advice.
I know your quick stories. 20 minutes later, I'm like,
no, this is quick. I need some advice. This morning I was in my kitchen and there was a big spider. I'm talking like $50 size spider, pretty big. And I tried to get him, and he quickly scurried back behind the counter. And now he's somewhere. And
I think you have to move.
Yeah, it's just the spider's house now.
I think it's over. You ever seen that? Harry Potter movie with the giant spiders?
Yeah.
The one where they go into the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I think of.
It wasn't that big.
8-foot long spider.
Yeah.
And Ron Weasley's like, Harry, what? Yeah. So that's all I think of. I was on a boat on a pond in New Hampshire when I was a teenager with a few friends, and all of a sudden we saw a spider that was like 5 or 6 inches long. I've never seen anything like it, and everybody's screaming. And I somehow managed to take the oar and get it onto the oar and like fling it into the pond. But I've had nightmares about spiders ever since. So I'm not coming to visit, Dave. Sorry.
I was getting to that. I was going to ask you to come take care of this, but I'll figure out another way.
I think that's what our podcast producers. I think that's what podcast producers part of the
they
job
take care of spiders.
No, Ben's on it.
All right. Let's. Ben says hell no. All right, let's wrap this up. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that subscribe button and like it there as well. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, brought to you by Car Shop. We'll talk to you next time.